All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to another installment, if you will, of the comprehensive yet informal study of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. I'm Matt, and with me are Patrick and Mark today. Mark is new joining us in the study, so welcome, Mark. Thanks for being here, and Patrick, as always, thank you as well. Today we are diving into more transcendental logic, which we've been beginning for a bit now, but we're going to continue with this. Let me get back to.
We're really ending the beginning here, I
Yeah.
would say. We've been just introducing things this whole time, and now we still have to introduce the analytic of concepts, but then the analytic of concepts actually begins. So we're actually starting the transcendental analytic here.
Yes, which is one of two parts of the transcendental logic, the other being dialectic, which we've talked a little about last video, so go check that out if that piques your interest, if you want to get a little intro to that before we start this. But yeah, so this is the end of the beginning of the analytic. So
And the beginning of the middle of the first part of the analytic.
you could divide this in like 6 quadrillion ways. So let's just leave that there. And do you have any comments about the content before we get into it, or do you just want to dive in?
I don't. My comment is, by this point, I blacked out in Kant reading.
Okay.
I get the first third and I get the last third, and this middle part, no idea what happens.
Okay. I do know that we're going to face the table of judgments, which is famous, and we pulled it up very long ago in the Kant study by this point for reference, but we're getting it here, and we're going to actually dive into that. So that is definitely important in terms of like how we form judgments about anything. So in our phenomenal experience. So that's important, and we're getting to it. And so I'm kind of looking forward to that and diving into it, and hopefully we can solve a lot of your blackout starting today. So if nobody else has anything to say, I think we can get into it.
I can
Do you want
start.
to start reading?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, here we go.
I understand by an analytic of concepts, not their analysis or the usual procedure of philosophical investigations, that of analyzing the content of concepts that present themselves and bringing them to distinctness, but rather the much less frequently attempted analysis of the faculty of understanding itself, in order to research the possibility of a priori concepts, by seeking them only in the understanding as their birthplace, and analyzing its pure use in general. For this is the proper business of a transcendental philosophy. The rest is the logical treatment of concepts in philosophy in general. We will, therefore, pursue pure concepts into their first seeds and predispositions in the human understanding, where they lie ready until with the opportunity of experience, they are finally developed and exhibit in their clarity by the very same understanding, liberated from the empirical conditions attaching to them.
Cool. So he's just kind of going into what he's been kind of saying. Honestly, I don't think this is anything's really surprising, based on what he's already said previously. We're going into an analysis of the faculty of the understanding, which is, he phrases it as research the possibility of a priori concepts by seeking them only understanding their birthplace. So we're just going into the place of a priori experience. He says later, liberated from the empirical conditions attaching to them. So they're related to empirical conditions in terms of how we understand at an abstract a priori level, kind of like how to organize empirical things, but this has nothing to do with them in terms of dependency. Kant thinks anyway. These are their own type of thing, totally a priori, prior to experience, and they belong to the faculty of the understanding, which is pure. So if you don't know what that means, definitely go back and take a look. But that really seems to be all he's saying, right?
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's.
I mean, that was 2 sentences.
Yeah, basically.
No, that was literally 2 sentences.
Oh, was it literally?
It was literally 2 sentences.
Oh my gosh, this is this whole... That was literally. No, it's one sentence. No, 2 cents. 2 cents.
Period.
Okay.
There you go.
Holy
2
crap,
sentences.
that's 2 sentences. Dear God. Okay. German academic writing never fails to, at least from this time period.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, that was simple. I think we can move on. Mark, are you all good there? Do you have any questions about that? Pretty straightforward, or?
So just like how we already found out the a priori intuitions, right? The space and time.
Yes.
Now we're trying to find the a priori basically means like innate in the mind, right?
Yeah, just prior to experience.
Prior to experience, yes.
So kind of from like using modern vocabulary, we're trying to find out the way the mind, the understanding part of the mind, like operates innately, like the structure.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's basically he's basically saying there, we're gonna do that. We're gonna look into it and see what's there. So that's really all he said in those 2 sentences. The first of which was like absurdly long. Anyway.
Yeah, I would say generally also, it's not that he is analyzing like a list of concepts, but the faculty of the understanding itself, like he said. So,
which there is a list of judgments that we'll get into.
So if you want to use computer language, right, I guess it would be not the programs, but the iOS.
Sure,
so
the operating system.
He's trying to find out how we can like conceptualize in the first place.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Seems
like what goes into the construction of conceptualizing? Like what are the preconditions necessary for like having those types of cognitions? I think really, and that's kind of the aim of every section. What goes behind this faculty really is kind of the scheme, to my understanding anyway. So yeah, all right, cool. If that all makes sense, I think we can move on. I can read this part. If one sets a faculty of cognition into play, then on various occasions, different concepts will become prominent that will make this faculty known and that can be collected in a more or less exhaustive treatise, depending on whether they have been observed for a longer time or with greater acuteness. Where this investigation will be completed can never be determined with certainty by means of this as it were a mechanical procedure. Further, the concepts that are discovered only as the opportunity arises will not reveal any order and systematic unity, but will rather be ordered in pairs only according to similarities and placed in series only in accord with the magnitude of their content. From the simple to the more composite, which series are by no means systematic, even if to some extent methodically produced. So this is interesting. Maybe we can break this down a little bit. So he seems to be saying that the way we go about this is more different than like something that's just kind of like a mechanical procedure, right?
So
we can't just
what he's saying basically, he's criticizing the most, I would say the most common method someone would attempt to try to figure this out is to basically observe your own experience and come up with a list of sort of the categories, right? And then naturally certain things would appear, and then he says by means of this more or less mechanical I'm not sure why he calls it mechanical. To me it seems the opposite of mechanical, it seems organic. But you're not starting from any foundational starting place here. You're just going with experience and then collecting what you've learned and trying to create an exhaustive list. But he's saying basically you can't be sure whether it's exhaustive that way.
Yeah.
And he needs to come up with an exhaustive list. And also that this wouldn't reveal any kind of order or systemic unity. So he needs to be sure that the concepts at play in the faculty of the understanding are exhaustively listed.
Yeah, he's not trying to like half-ass this.
Right.
Yeah.
So he needs a method in order to do that. Seems to be what he's saying.
Yeah, and so I think he'll probably talk about that. Hopefully not just repeat himself, but we'll see. Transcendental philosophy has the advantage, but also the obligation to seek its concepts in accordance with a principle, since they spring pure and unmixed from the understanding as absolute unity, and must therefore be connected among themselves in accordance with a concept or idea. Such a connection, however, provides a rule by means of which I lost that. Oh, the place of each pure concept of the understanding and the completeness of all of them together can be determined a priori, which would otherwise depend on whim or chance.
Yeah, I need to slow down to understand this one.
Yes, me too.
So transcendental philosophy has the advantage, but also the obligation to seek
With
its
the principle.
concepts in accordance with a principle, i.e., some principle. Since they spring pure and unmixed from the understanding as an absolute unity. What does he mean by saying that they spring as an absolute unity?
What I think that means is that. So the first part of that is like a callback to like the or the earlier part where he said concepts are like spontaneously, arise, I guess, out of the human mind. And then the second part of that, the unity, I think that means. There aren't like, so maybe just going.
I've had an inkling of it actually as you were speaking.
Like I think that like this unity is what he's talking about.
Well, I think what he's talking about now is transcendental philosophy is what the philosophy of how it is possible for us to have an experience.
I was gonna say that too. I was like maybe he's hinting at the apperception thing.
I think he is hinting at the apperception here. I think he's probably talking about the fact that transcendental philosophy. Well, they spring pure and unmixed from the understanding in what? What is the absolute unity? The absolute unity of experience.
Which he has not explicitly talked about yet. This is a kind of implicit.
But he repeats himself constantly.
Yeah.
Right? He says, basically, like his first introduction is super confusing, and then he says it more clearly, and then he repeats it several times. This is usually the way it goes.
That's the formula generally, at least up to this point, yeah. Okay, so that makes sense.
I think he's probably talking
right.
about the absolute unity of experience.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And therefore they have to be connected among themselves in accordance with a concept or idea, namely the concept or idea necessary for the unity of experience, which is probably apperception, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking that.
Such a connection, however, provides a rule of which the place of each pure concept of the understanding and the completeness of all of them together can be determined a priori. I'm not sure how apperception provides that rule, though. First of all, Mark, any familiarity with apperception?
Yeah. Before that, I had a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah.
So, in what it means by unity, my translation, there's the sentence here. It's written. I think I could read it. It's more like clear what it means by unity. He's saying that. I'll just read it.
Okay.
From transcendental philosophy has the advantage, but also the obligation of locating its concepts according to a principle. Mm-hmm. For these concepts arise pure and unmixed from the understanding, which is an absolute unity. So I think that understanding is an absolute unity.
Oh, so the understanding as absolute unity. That really actually helps.
Yeah, that helps tremendously. That's why I hate this translation.
Yo, Plutarch gang, rise up.
The reason we use this translation is because Drew, all of our college, requires us to use this translation.
And it's just the one I'm also most familiar with as a result.
But it sucks as a result.
Yes. Although to be fair, that's not totally off because what makes the apperception happen is the understanding. So it's very related, and I don't think we were super off the mark.
No.
If off the mark at all. Maybe a little, but
slightly, yes. But the principle is there.
Yes. Cool.
Because apperception is the most immediate product of the understanding.
Yes.
So thanks for clearing that up, Mark.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you for providing another translation. Maybe keep that handy if you're able to do that. That would be appreciated, I think, in case we run into something like that. Thank you. Cool. Okay. Well, now that that's cleared up, and then such a connect. But then you were confused about the principle. But does that make sense now? Because maybe the principle.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Such a connection provides a rule by means of which the place of each pure concept of the understanding and the completeness of them altogether can be determined a priori, which would otherwise depend on whim or chance. I'm not sure how that works. In what way does each concept being connected in the understanding provide a rule? What is that rule?
Could I interject?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So here, I'll read So we read from this translation. I'll read these 3 sentences from mine.
Watch this be super clear.
So it says, I think basically what it means is that the rule is what makes each, like, this concept or that concept a concept in the first place. Like, there's this rule that makes them all be able to be classified as a concept. So here it says, for these concepts arise pure and unmixed from the understanding, which is an absolute unity. And hence these concepts themselves must cohere with each other according to one concept or idea. Such coherence, however, provides us with a rule by which we can determine a priori the proper place for each pure concept of understanding and the completeness of all of them taken together.
I think that's a little bit clearer, but still not completely to me. So basically, the coherence, the fact that all of them cohere is the rule? That each one of them must cohere in the understanding?
Yeah, that's what I'm confused about too. I don't know what it means. Must cohere, which hence these concepts themselves must cohere with each other according to one concept or idea. That's
So this might be hinting at like maybe just how the understanding functions, and I don't know if this has anything to do, especially because we were talking about apperception. This might have to do with like the eye. Maybe that's what he's hinting at, because the eye coheres the concepts.
Well,
correct?
one thing I'm thinking about now is maybe we're thinking about rule in the wrong way.
Okay.
Right? We could think about rule as like, this is a law, this is a regulation. What if it's a rule in terms of like a yardstick?
Oh, like a measure.
Yeah, so we can measure whether each of these concepts is coherent according to, well, its coherence in the understanding. Maybe that's the idea.
Folks, time right now is 10 minutes 5. Just a reminder,
Yeah.
study hours begin in 10 minutes.
We were warned.
And the library closes at 8 p.m. The doors will be locked momentarily.
Oh, that wasn't that bad. Okay.
All right. So
that would make sense, I think, because then the connection so that unity provides a measure.
right, the context.
Oh, so we're comparing it to unity to see like if the things are unified.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yes,
that makes
so
sense.
if they are unified in a single understanding, then that is how we know we have a complete listing of the concepts.
Cool.
Does that make sense to you, Mark?
Yeah, it makes more sense. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, I think that taking rule as a yardstick makes more sense than
Yes,
rule like a law.
Yes.
Okay.
That just seems to logically click better. Okay. Cool. I guess we can move on then.
I'll pick it up.
Mark, do you want to read, since you have the PDF up, right?
Sure.
Unless you don't want to, that's totally fine. I just wanted to. You're curious.
Yeah.
Patrick and I read it already. Okay.
So on the Transcendental Clue.
Yes.
Yes.
You can just start reading the thing if you don't read the title. That's fine.
You have both translations up?
Yeah, but I'm reading from the one you guys are using right now.
Cool. Just for consistency.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
I'll just read the title as well.
Sure. Yeah, you can.
On the Transcendental Clue for the discovery of all pure concepts of the understanding, on the logical use of the understanding in general. The understanding has been explained above only negatively, as a nonsensible faculty of cognition. Now we cannot partake of intuition independently of sensibility. The understanding is therefore not a faculty of intuition. But besides intuition, there is no other kind of cognition than through concepts. Thus, the cognition of every, at least human, understanding is a cognition through concepts, not intuitive but discursive. All intuitions, as sensible, rest on affections, concepts therefore on functions. By a function, however, I understand the unity of the action of ordering different representations under a common one. Concepts are therefore grounded on the spontaneity of thinking, as sensible intuitions are grounded on the receptivity of impressions. Now, the understanding can make no other use of these concepts than that of judging by means of them. Since no representation pertains to the object immediately except intuition alone, a concept is thus never immediately related to an object, but is always related to some other representation of it, whether that be an intuition or itself already a concept. Judgment is therefore the immediate cognition of an object, hence the representation of a representation of it. In every judgment, there is a concept that holds of many, and that among this many also comprehends a given representation, which is then related immediately to the object. So, in the judgment, for example, all bodies are divisible. The concept of the divisible is related to various other concepts. Among these, however, it is here particularly related to the concept of a body, and this in turn is related to certain appearances that come before us. These objects are therefore immediately represented by the concept of divisibility. All judgments are accordingly functions of unity among our representations, since instead of an immediate representation, a higher one, which comprehends this and other representations under itself, is used for the cognition of the object, and many possible cognitions are thereby drawn together in one. We can, however, trace all actions of the understanding back to judgments, so that the understanding in general can be represented as a faculty for judging. For according to what has been said above, it is a faculty for thinking. Thinking is a cognition through concepts. Concepts, however, as predicates of possible judgments, are related to some representation of a still undetermined object. The concept of a body does signify something, for example, metal, which can be cognized through that concept. It is therefore a concept only because other representations are contained under it by means of which it can be related to objects. It is therefore the predicate for a possible judgment. For example, every metal is a body. The functions of the understanding can therefore all be found together if one can exhaustively exhibit the functions of unity in judgments. The following section will make it evident that this can readily be accomplished.
All right. Well,
Okay.
sorry for the mouthful.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that, though.
Yep.
So we can break this down.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed immediately,
Mhm.
Kant is writing in a very, very different way here. Did you notice how many sentences here start and finish within like a line or less?
Yes, I would notice that.
Right? He's rapid fire, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And then he doesn't break it up at all into paragraphs.
Mm.
He just goes through this whole thing.
Yes.
And I also think there's definitely a case of attend to your faculties, bro.
Yeah.
Right? In the beginning, he's taking it up like, you don't have anything else besides intuitions and concepts. How? Simply attend to your faculties, bro.
Yeah.
Right? That sort of has become something we've been saying a lot, Mark,
Yeah.
but basically the idea is at some point he just says, if I attend to my faculties, like literally he says that, and he finds this, and I'm like, okay, that's not really an argument. He's not really demonstrating it much. He's just saying, think about it, it's like this.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of non-argued appeal to this is your experience of things.
Yes.
And a lot of the time I think that did check out though.
Yes. I think it made sense.
But
I think a lot of this too is like kind of not too different from like what we covered in the introduction. Maybe this seems to be a lot of like repeated things, which honestly isn't.
you think so?
I mean, there's definitely new stuff, but I'm saying like not all of it. Like the understanding is not a faculty of intuition. Maybe not the introduction,
Sure,
but
yeah, but like he's basically reviewing at that point. He talks about what the understanding is and introduces something very new. The number one takeaway for me out of this whole thing is the understanding is a faculty of unity. Concepts unite representations.
Which I guess I thought might be a review as well, because I thought that's what we were talking about.
No, he said specifically the understanding has been explained above only negatively. Right? The definition of the understanding has only been it's not intuition, it's spontaneous. It's not
right, because then he
because
goes into like what makes a concept.
what does it actually do?
Yeah.
Like what does a concept actually do?
Yes.
He says it unites otherwise disparate representations under a common representation. So unity itself is sort of the fundamental concept.
Yes.
And he says then if we can exhaustively
Which is what he was talking about earlier, I think, with the principle.
Sure, yes.
The
functions
measure.
of the understanding can therefore all be found together if one can exhaustively exhibit the functions of unity in judgments.
Okay, that makes sense.
So what do we think about, I'm going to like sort of begin each sentence and I'll skip through if it's I think we've covered it already.
Sure.
Or super intuitive.
Yeah.
The understanding has been explained only negatively. Fine, good.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot partake of intuition independently of sensibility. Okay. The understanding is not a faculty of intuition, of course.
Mm-hmm.
No other thing than concepts and intuitions, sure.
Yeah.
It's discursive, not intuitive, sure. All intuitions as sensible rest on affections, yes. Concepts on functions, okay, that's a new term. Functions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By function, however, I understand the unity of the action of ordering different
yes.
representations under a common
So
one.
this is the function of the understanding, which, like we just said, is unity.
Function of the understanding is unity.
Yes.
Yes. Which specifically what that does is it orders different representations under a common one.
Right. Which, of course, any unity would do.
Yes.
Okay, so concepts are therefore grounded in spontaneity. Yeah, we've got that. Now, the understanding can make no other use of these than by judging by means of them.
I think that is pretty clear, right?
Yeah, I
They
think
would-
that's
those building
pretty
would need to go into
intuitive.
it, yeah.
Anyway, that concepts go along hand in hand with a judgment.
Yes, that's
Right,
pretty.
a judgment, X is Y, right? That is the unity of X and Y. Sure. Cats are animals. A certain form of unity of cat and animal.
Mm-hmm.
Namely that cats belong to the community, the broader category of animals.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So, since no representation pertains to objects immediately except through intuition alone, concepts are not immediately related to objects, but related to some other representation of it. So, a concept is never immediately related to an object.
Yes.
It's always related either to another concept or to an intuition.
Yes. Because
So I see a cat and I go, cat.
that's and then the object.
Right.
Following the conceptual. Like,
Right, so that's an immediate relation
Okay.
to intuition.
Yes.
Right. The object of my concept is the intuition of fur or whatever.
Yeah.
There's no real name for it because names are all concepts.
Yeah.
Sure. So then I can also say something like all cats are animals. This is a relationship of concept to concept.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
That are related to objects but don't
Right.
belong.
So it always,
In that
they
example.
can be immediately related to an intuition or they can be immediately related to an intuition.
Yep.
They're never related to an object directly.
Nope.
Okay.
Cool.
So, judgment is therefore the immediate cognition of an object, yes, and hence the representation of a representation of it. Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Judgment is a concept that holds of the many, and among this many comprehends a given representation, which is related to immediately. Okay. Then he gives the example. I think that's very similar to the example we already have. These objects are therefore immediately represented by the concept of divisibility. Right. This is actually what we just discussed again. Right.
Divisibility in terms of like.
Well, divisibility here would be all
Oh,
cats are
all
animals.
bodies are divisible.
This is
Oh,
exactly what we did on our own.
Yes.
Is what
Yes.
he's
He's just
doing
going through the example. Okay,
Yes.
I see. I thought he meant some greater abstract, like conceptual divisibility. I was like, wait, what? No, he's just
No,
talking
all bodies
are
are divisible. The
Divisibility.
divisibility applies to
To
the
bodies.
bodies.
Yes, in
That's
the
concept to
example.
concept.
Okay.
But those concepts themselves apply to actual objects, right? Of
Or
experience.
intuitions, yeah.
Intuitions, so to speak. Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay. We can, however, trace all actions of the understanding back to judgment, so that the understanding in general can be represented as a faculty for judging. I'm not 100% sure what he means there. What does he mean, trace all actions?
So I think he's just saying that.
There
Well,
isn't any
actions
other-
is a little vague, but basically he's probably meaning trace all, like actions of judging, like the action of like any instance of a judgment you can have would go back to the understanding.
I think it's the other way around. He's saying any instance of the understanding acting would be a judgment.
Oh yes, I think I flip flopped them, but yes,
Okay, though.
I think that's what actions is. Yeah.
Okay. For according faculty for thinking, thinking cognition through concepts, cool. Concepts, predicates, possible judgments, okay. related to an undetermined object, concept of body. Concepts, however, as predicates of possible judgments, are related to some representation of a still undetermined object.
Yeah,
So-
well, that's what we were talking about, like the
Yes.
intuition, right? Before
So
the
cat is a concept, right? Its object is undetermined because we don't have a specific cat there.
yes,
When
until
we're
you've
talking
applied
about-
the concept.
Until
to it.
we've applied the concept in an actual situation.
Yeah.
Concept of the body, that's the example there. It's therefore a concept only. Okay, makes sense. And then, like we said, the functions of understanding can therefore all be found together if one can exhaustively exhibit the functions of unity in judgments. And the following section will make it evident that this can readily be accomplished. How's he going to do that?
Crazy. So this is a bigger thing coming up.
Okay, that definitely, all of that now makes sense to me.
Cool. Yes.
You have any questions, Mark, or thoughts?
No, so I'm basically, what I get from it is this whole paragraph is he's trying to set the stage for trying to find the functions, all of the functions of the understanding, because he says we can find all of the functions of the understanding if we can exhibit completely the functions of unity in judgments, right?
Yes. That's exactly what he's doing. So he was just detailing that and giving examples.
What I have a question about is when he says the function of the understanding is unity, what does that mean? Does that mean that the job of the faculty of understanding is to unify different intuitions, or what's going on?
So it's to unify
Really
representations.
general. Yeah, so it could be intuitions or concepts. So, for example, we could unify intuitions. There's no name for intuitions because all names are concepts, right?
Mhm.
But bear with that. Put that aside.
You have to attend your faculties to
Yeah.
understand intuition.
Like if you put up your hand in your face, right? You don't. It's not a given to you that this is your hand. You have to think about it to know it's your hand. You think about it very quickly because you're used to it. It's almost automatic, but it's not actually automatic, right?
Yeah.
So instead, you have a jumble of intuitions, right? Often associated with color. Sure?
Color, yeah, shape, all
Color,
that.
shape. I would argue that really you get color first and then shape. You can't imagine shape without color. Anyway, moving forward from that, you have to unify these representations, the intuitions, under a concept hand.
Yeah.
Making sense so far? But this isn't the only thing a concept can do. A concept can also unify other concepts. For example, I could unify the concept of hands under the heading parts of the body. And parts of the body doesn't directly relate really to any intuition. Instead, it relates to other concepts.
It relates, which they relate to
Intuitions.
Intuitions.
Right, so it can be either immediately or mediately related to intuitions.
Yeah. So basically, so what the faculty of understanding does is unify representation.
Exactly.
Which is, I'm pretty sure, verbatim the language he uses as well. So yes, I'm glad that makes sense now.
And so what does the word judgment mean in this case? Is judgment...
It's like a proposition, basically. Like you're making, you're asserting like a proposition about something you experience or some a priori.
I would define it as any thought which can be stated in such a way that the statement would be either true or false.
Yeah.
And that is, a judgment is always a result of the faculty of the understanding, not intuition.
Right, because judgments are made through concepts.
Right, and intuition doesn't have anything to say. You might think, oh, it can say, I'm seeing red right now, but red itself is a concept.
Yeah.
Under which we unify various intuitions. And that's why it's basically impossible to talk about intuitions.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, of course. Okay, cool. So, moving on from all of that to the next section where he will show that this can really be accomplished. We can have the unity in judgments and therefore get the exhaustive list of concepts, right? This is what we're after, I think. I just want to make sure I'm saying that right, using the right words. Cool. Okay. So let's do that, or at least let's see how Kant tries to do that. If we abstract from all content of a judgment in general and attend only to the mere form of the understanding in it, we find that the function of thinking in that can be brought under 4 titles, each of which contains under itself 3 moments. They can suitably be represented in the following table. And ladies and gentlemen, here we have it, the table of judgments,
Categories, right?
logical judgments. Huh?
Judgments. This is the table of judgments.
Yes, of logical.
And then what is the table? Yeah, the table of categories comes in a little later.
Yes. So these are the type of judgments. Does he go into? Yes, he goes just into them. I was going to go over them now, but I'll just let him do that and try to continue on in the actual book. So if you're confused about what these are, I'm pretty sure he goes on to explain every single one. So I'm just going to move on and let him do that, and we'll go over that after. Since this division seems to depart in several points, although not essential ones, from the customary technique of the logicians, the following protests against a worrisome misunderstanding.
You're not going to read the table?
Huh? Oh, well, I was going to, because we're going to go into every single one.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. I figured we would just move on.
Okay.
And talk about, I can refer back to it, obviously, like the table, but.
I don't think we're getting into that today, though.
Yes, we're pretty sure we're ending after.
So let's go through it now so that we know what we're doing.
Okay, all right. So there are 4 categories under which there are 3 what Kant calls moments, or basically subtype or types belonging to the greater, more universal type. So there's quantity, quality, relation, and modality. And that sounds like what they are. So quantity has to, do with the amount. So we have universal, which is for everything. Particular, which is for a subtype of universal. And singular, which is a subtype of a particular. So we just a single, like one thing. Particular, like a set, but not the universal set, not everything. And then the universal would be everything about whatever concept you're talking about. Then moving on, we have quality. Which is a little vague, but if we look into the subtypes, we can see what it's about. So affirmative, so this is like giving something in a positive regard, like this is this. And on the inverse of that, we have negative, which is this is not this, right? At least I think that's all they are. I don't know if I'm being too specific, but that's basically at least how you can think of them, at least for now. And then we have infinite judgment, which is... I don't exactly remember.
So I believe this is affirmative, yes. Negative, no. Infinite, not yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is, if you remember, Zizek
Oh,
talking about
that's why. Yes,
being
okay.
undead.
Yes.
How undead is different from alive.
Being, yes.
Right, it's the quality of not being yes. Right,
Yes.
That's no to the yes.
So there's
it's
the
not the negation. It's the
Gotcha.
The,
yes. That's a great example.
The non-positive. I would not prefer to.
Yes.
I would prefer not to.
Yes.
It's different.
Yes. And that is yes, and that's very big in post-Kantian philosophy. But at least how we can understand it here, and the reason why I think it's called infinite might be helpful to go into, because if you just affirmative and negative, right? They operate in binaries. But infinite, you're just saying not yes, and you can kind of do that infinitely, right? If I want to say this table is not a chair, is not a me, is not a painting, I can come up with literally infinite amount of things that it is not, which is why it's called the infinite judgment.
And Kant says that this doesn't defy the law of the excluded middle. This is definitely a preview. But I know it seems like he's defying the law of the excluded middle and saying, oh, there's a third thing besides yes and no. But no, he's saying that this is a transcendental moment rather than a logical judgment. In like strict general like logic, there's just yes and no. Either no or yes. However, not yes is different for the being experiencing it.
Yes.
Is his statement.
Okay, interesting. We can get into that later, I'm sure. So moving on from quality, which is that's set of 3 as you can see in this table, we move on to relational, which is how concepts are related to each other. We have categorical, which is, I think it's just is, right? Kind of like is statements, like this is this category.
Yes.
Then we have hypothetical, which is if then, and then disjunctive, which is or. I think I have that right.
I believe that's correct.
Okay, so we'll go for that for now and correct. I'm pretty sure almost positive that's right. And then modality. I think this is the like certainty. I don't know. How would you describe modality?
Assertoric and objective. Problematic, yes. So problematic. So modality has to do with possibility, right? Problematic is the idea that it is possible that X. Assertoric, it is actually the case that X. And apodictic, it is necessarily always the case that X.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So one would be problematic would be possible, assertoric would be actual, and apodictic would be necessary.
Okay, cool. So that's the table. We'll go into more detail on these, but that's kind of the basic gist, is so you have a grasp of what you're looking at. And he goes into that, because you might be saying, how do you know that you're not just using your own language? Well, he says this stuff later. So we'll go into that. Yeah, so let's move forward if that all makes sense. I think it's pretty just self-explanatory. All makes sense, Mark, so far? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, it makes sense. Just basically a little confused. So what this table is defining the 4 different types of functions that the faculty of understanding uses when making judgments.
Yes, so it's like the rule. Yeah, it's the type. It's all of the possible types of judgment.
And then all of the moments. I don't know how to describe that, but
Just
I
like
think
subtypes,
it's most
basically.
obvious with like stuff like quality. Yes, no, not yes. Just the way those judgments can be, I guess, is the best way to put it in my head. But he calls them 3 moments of the 4 titles of possible judgments.
Yeah, because there's this table, and then there was the other table,
Yes.
right? Like
That's of.
I don't understand the difference right now.
We will get into that. Let's just leave
Yes.
that for later. Let's just try to understand this for now.
Yes.
Because I know they're related, and I think this one determines how the other one works, but I'm not sure. So we'll just get to
they
that.
Are, each one is related to the others. I know that.
Yes.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll get onto that. But yes, good looking. You're right. And there are going to be crossover there for sure. So we'll get into the specifics of that when we get there. Cool. Okay, great. So I'll move on then. Since this division seems to depart in several points, although not essential ones, from the customary technique of the logicians, the following protests against a worrisome misunderstanding are not necessary. Is that like a little typo or like a grammatical?
Not unnecessary.
Oh, are not.
So, in other words, the infinite judgment to their necessity.
Oh. Yeah, okay.
Mind you, this is not modal necessity.
Yeah. God. Okay.
Well, I guess it is modal necessity from the perspective of for his purpose.
Yeah.
It is modal necessity for his hypothetical imperative of doing the critique of pure reason exhaustively.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a nonsense jumble of phrases.
I was gonna say you can try to like if you want to give yourself like Max Kant challenge like homework or whatever, like you can try to define the critique of pure reason through the critique of pure reason, and it gets really fucking trippy and confusing. Patrick and I, he just kind of did a little bit there, and we've done it before, and it gets really just. So I would recommend try to use like more immediate examples and simple ones before doing something like that.
It's an infinite apodictic hypothetical judgment.
That's gracious. Okay. Basically, he's just saying that even though it's similar to the technique of the logicians, it protests against worrisome misunderstanding are not
unnecessary.
So what is he talking about there? Though what's not unnecessary with the following?
Addressing.
A misunderstanding.
He's literally just. You know that thing where you defend against objections? That's it. That's all.
What objections, though? I'm confused. I guess there are just objections, I guess.
Well, for one, infinite. That's a big objection.
So, like, okay. So that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense. Okay. So.
Yeah, see, he's going to get right into that, too.
Yes.
Likewise, infinite logic, as in transcendental logic, infinite must be distinguished from affirmative ones.
Yes. Okay. And did I... Just real quick, I went up to 209. Are we doing another page after that?
We're doing 207, 208, 209. We are doing like the beginning of 210.
Oh, shit.
Rip.
Dude, I did it again 2 times in a row.
Oops, I did it
Yeah. All right. Well, it's fine. We can probably. I don't even think I need to have it. It's not very much, right? It's a little bit. All right. We'll get to that when we get there. Let's continue on. So number one, Mark, do you want to read the first little paragraph here on
Only in Kant is that a little.
B97, basically that big first number one paragraph?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool.
So
Thanks.
from the logicians, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
The logicians rightly say that in the use of judgments in syllogisms.
Syllogisms.
Okay, yeah. The logician rightly say that in the use of judgments and syllogisms, singular judgments can be treated like universal ones. For just because they have no domain at all, their predicate is not merely related to some of what is contained under the concept of the subject while being excluded from another part of it. The predicate, therefore, holds of that concept without exception, just as if the latter were a generally valid concept with a domain, with the predicate applying to the whole of what is signified. If, on the contrary, we compare a singular judgment with a generally valid one merely as cognition with respect to quantity, then the former relates to the latter as unity relates to infinity, and is therefore in itself essentially different from the latter. Therefore, if I consider a singular judgment, not only with respect to its internal validity, but also as cognition in general, with respect to the quantity it has in comparison with other cognitions, then it is surely different from generally valid judgments and deserves a special place in complete table of the moments of thinking in general, though obviously not in that logic that is limited only to the use of judgments with respect to each other.
Okay. Let's break this down.
Yes, so in traditional logic at this time, categorical logic, it's Aristotelian, and the way you would say, you could say all Socrateses and it would make sense, basically, is what it's saying. All Socrateses are men.
Yeah, syllogisms, yeah.
Yeah, so the idea here is, I think, yeah.
He's basically saying it's correct, right?
Well, yes, he's saying that the logicians, there's no need to distinguish the universal from the singular, right? You just need all and some. If you're just worried about what the outcome is in terms of, like, is it literally going to be true, false, which is the purpose of general logic, right? You can say all X is Y and all X be only one thing, and that will be correct. However, when you are actually thinking about X, and there's only one of it, if I say all Earths are round, right? That's not how I actually think.
Yeah, okay. So it's comparing like logical validity versus like the mode of our actual
Thought.
thinking, yes.
Right, which is the general theme here, because this is the transcendental derivation of the categories. It's related to the way our minds work, rather than what is like truth tables, basically.
Yeah. Yep.
Rather than like just in terms of what will give us a true or false statement.
Cool. All right, and that's just pretty much number one. Right?
Does that make sense?
Yes. Mark, you good on that?
Yep, so he's basically clarifying the difference between singular and generally valid judgments, right?
Right. Well, he's saying that, of course, in general logic, you could use a general judgment rather than a singular one, and it would be fine. So his distinction rests on the fact that this is transcendental logic rather than general logic.
Yeah, because so general logic, what would it? It would.
Yeah, he discusses this a little bit earlier. This is the part I think you actually did miss, and I actually, if I can, I want to get to general logic. Yeah. So
I can go back, and you guys have recorded these, right? So
I can,
I
but
don't.
I
don't
have
think
the
that
passage.
one's not on YouTube yet. So
Okay.
as of the time it's recording, so he'll just read it real quick.
yeah, let me see.
okay.
Okay. Now, logic, in turn, can be taken with two different aims, either as a logic of the general or the particular use of the understanding. The former concerns the absolutely necessary rules of thinking, without which no use of the understanding takes place, and it therefore concerns these rules without regards to the difference of objects to which it may be directed. So that's general logic. And also, he says at the beginning of On Transcendental Logic, general logic abstracts from all content of cognition, i.e. from relation of it to an object, and considers only the logical form of the relations of cognitions to one another. But now, since there are four pure as well as empirical intuitions, a distinction between pure and empirical thinking of objects could also well be found. So, generally here, general logic considers only logical form and whether there's validity or not. And Kant's question here is not concerned with, are my statements logically valid, but rather, how is the faculty of understanding, how does it work? How can it be used? How does it actually represent objects in our mind?
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Cool.
So I could validly say all Earths are round. That would be the exact same, like if you used all Earths are round in some kind of logical argument, everything would turn out the exact same as if you said Earth is round, but you think of it differently.
Yeah. The actual, I guess, engagement with the understanding, maybe is the phrase I'll use, is different in terms of like because it engages with the content, and so you're thinking about it in a specific way that it does not reflect general logic, at least in terms of like its rules and very formal abstract things that abstract from content.
And I think we're going to get something similar here with 2.
Cool. So we can.
I'll start there.
Yeah, you can read that.
Likewise, in transcendental logic, infinite judgments must also be distinguished from affirmative ones, even though in general logic they are rightfully included with the latter and do not constitute a special member of the classification. So in other words, infinite judgments are more or less the double negative. It's not the case that it's not the case that it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So life, death, undeath is the idea Zizek gives, which is a very sort of almost a mystical way of putting it. But simply here, necessary, unnecessary, not unnecessary. I'm now thinking that maybe he made a joke when he used the not unnecessary here.
It's possible. It's so hard for me to like even tell that because the way he writes is already funny to me. So
like the idea of Kant including a joke somewhere in here, possibly.
Sure.
Well, I want to believe.
Yeah.
Okay. But not unnecessary is different in terms of actual experience compared with necessary, is the argument he's going to make. Mm-hmm. Even though in general logic they are rightfully included with the latter and do not constitute a special member of the classification. General logic abstracts from all content of the predicate, even if it is negative, and considers only whether it is attributed to the subject or opposed to it. Transcendental logic, however, also considers the value or content of the logical affirmation made in a judgment by means of a merely negative predicate, and what sort of gain this yields for the whole of cognition. If I had said that the soul is not mortal, then I would have at least avoided an error by means of a negative judgment. Now, by means of the proposition the soul is non-mortal, I have certainly made an actual affirmation that is, as far as logical form is concerned, for I have placed the soul within the unlimited domain of undying beings. Now, since that which is mortal contains the part of the whole domain of possible beings, but that which is undying the other, nothing is said by the proposition but that the soul is one of the infinite multitude of things that remain if I take away everything that is mortal. But the infinite sphere of the possible is limited only to the extent that that which is mortal is separated from it. Okay, hold on, let me read that again. But the infinite sphere of the possible is thereby only limited to the extent that which is mortal is separated from it, and the soul is placed in the remaining space of its domain.
Oh, so it's basically like it's like a soul of the gaps, basically, like whatever.
Well, I think what he's saying here is you might not positively know and have a correct judgment
Yes.
that the soul is immortal.
Yes.
You can't assert that the realm of the soul
But
is in the realm of undying
infinitely
beings.
you can.
But infinitely, maybe you can.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because why wouldn't he then? Because he asserts that space is non-finite. He seems to. I don't know. This is where it gets weird when we apply it to what Kant actually believes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But even with this exception, the space still remains infinite, and more parts could be taken away from it without the concept of the soul growing the least and being affirmatively determined. In regard to logical domain, therefore, this infinite judgment is merely limited with regard to the content of cognition in general, and to this extent must not be omitted from the transcendental table of all moments of thinking and judgments, since the function of the understanding that is hereby exercised may perhaps be important in the field of its pure a priori cognition. I'd like to review some of that.
No, yeah, for sure.
Okay. So, the last sentence that I definitely grasp is, I have made an actual affirmation as far as logical form is concerned, for I have placed the soul within the unlimited domain of undying beings. Okay, so we have two domains here, undying beings and dying beings.
Mm-hmm.
The soul is placed, as far as logical form is concerned, in the realm of undying beings.
Yes.
So it's therefore the same whether I said the soul is immortal, undying, or not mortal, since there's an excluded middle. You can only be one or the other. Okay, I understand that. Now, since that which is mortal contains one part of the whole domain of possible beings, but that which is undying the other, that's like I said. Nothing is said by my proposition, but that the soul is one of the infinite multitude of things that remain if I take away everything that is mortal. Right, so the soul is among the realm of the multitude of things that are not mortal. But the infinite sphere of the possible is thereby limited only to the extent that that which is mortal is separated from it.
Yeah, didn't we just say this? It's saying that.
Is it just being redundant?
I think so. I think he's just saying, the infinite sphere.
The possible is thereby limited only to the extent that that which is mortal is separated from it.
So anything not mortal, not only belongs to like the negative, but also has, infinite, lends itself to the infinite judgment, so to speak.
Infinite sphere of the possible is limited only to the extent that which is mortal. Okay.
So it's limited only to mortal, but everything else is open to it.
Okay.
Because
but
it's
even with this exception, the space still remains infinite, and more parts could be taken away from it without the concept of the soul growing in the least and being affirmatively determined.
Yeah, so he's basically saying it's a bad argument to say that you can...
So the soul doesn't seem to be determined.
Right, exactly.
By being placed outside of the realm of the mortal.
Yes, you're not really saying anything about it other than it's not mortal, which
words,
could be a million other things.
Knowledge isn't added to it.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's non-determined.
Yes.
But at the same time, in terms of logical domain, in regard to logical domain, therefore this infinite judgment is merely limiting with regard to the content of cognition in general, and to this extent it must not be omitted from the transcendental table of moments of thinking and judgment, since the function of the understanding that is hereby exercised may perhaps be important in the field of its pure a priori cognition. And he definitely does have these rules which are infinite, which are that we cannot assert, for instance, an end to the universe. We cannot positively make such an assertion. So that's an infinite judgment that he actually uses. To me, it's just not clear why that doesn't constitute knowledge. It's negative knowledge, but it still informs us. It teaches us.
Well, he doesn't really say that in here. That's kind of something I think we inferred. So maybe we could just say that then.
It's interesting. Your thoughts, Mark? Are you still with us, following us?
Yeah, it was a bit.
Yeah, so I started to get pretty lost around A68. I think there's a lot here that needs like prior knowledge that I haven't read up about yet. So I was thinking, up until where were we going to go in this session?
We're going to just finish this.
Yeah, the second section.
Okay, yeah. So I was thinking I'll read up until that section on my own time to just be on track with you guys, and I'll also do some reading on my own.
Okay. I mean, if you want to, you can ask us questions too. That's kind of like one of the points of this is to like uncover this, even if you don't have a lot of prerequisite knowledge. So if you just want to kind of go into something that is a little more tangentially related but still important for understanding, then we can do that.
Well, I think part of it is we got to respect the man's time a little.
That's true too. Okay, so yeah, that's fine. So if you want to read on your own,
if you do have a question right now, we can try to.
Yes, I was just trying to open that possibility.
More like specific questions. It's just like a general.
Okay, all right, that's fine then. Yeah. So if you feel the need to do that on your own, then go ahead and we'll move on.
Okay.
And you can ask us at another point too if you'd like. Okay.
So you guys, so you guys were gonna finish at the end of section 2, right?
Yes, the end of section 2.
Okay, so I'll read that on my own, and I'll reread this, and I'll do some other reading like related to helping myself understand this. And then next Friday.
Yes, we should be doing this next week unless I say otherwise. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, does next week not work?
No, I'm graduating.
Wait, graduation is next week? Is that for undergrad too?
No, I'm done.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's 2 weeks.
I'm done.
Right?
That is my last. Yes, that's 2 weeks. That's
Yes.
my last day of teaching, so I should be fine. Yes.
Okay. Yes, next Friday. The Friday after, probably not.
No,
Okay.
not the
Yeah,
Friday
and
after.
I'll like interact with the server.
Yeah.
well.
Well, you can text me on Instagram.
I bet we could come up with another day though. Right?
We could,
on
yeah.
On
You've got some time,
Instagram or on the
if
server?
I'm not mistaken, because you're graduating on the 11th.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've got time. So we'll be in touch about it. Instagram,
Okay.
Discord, whatever.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Today was very useful.
Oh, I'm so glad. Okay, great. Yeah. If you're heading out, see you, and hope to see you next week.
Yep. See you guys.
Sounds good. Bye.
Yeah, see you. Great having you, Mark.
Cool. Okay, I can close the
So
Discord.
let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
We've got
Number 3, right? Yeah. Okay. All relation. Did you read the last one, or did Mark?
Yeah.
I don't remember even who.
I read the last one.
Okay, so I'll read this one. All relations of thinking and judgment are those: A, the predicate to the subject; B, of the ground of the consequence; and C, between the cognition that is to be divided and all of the members of the division. In the first kind of judgment, only 2 concepts are considered to be in relation to each other; in the second, 2 judgments; and in the third, several judgments. The hypothetical proposition, if there is a perfect justice, then obstinate evil will be punished, really contains the relation of 2 propositions: there is a perfect justice, and obstinate evil is punished. Whether both of these propositions in themselves are true remains unsettled here. It is only the implication that is thought by means of this judgment. Finally, the disjunctive judgment contains the relations of 2 or more propositions to another, though not the relation of sequence, but rather that of logical opposition, insofar as the sphere of one judgment excludes that of the other, yet at the same time the relation of community, insofar as the judgments together exhaust the sphere of cognition proper. It is therefore a relation of the parts of the sphere of a cognition, where the sphere of each part is the complement of that of the others in the sum total of the divided cognition. For example, the world exists either through blind chance, or through inner necessity, or through an external cause. Each of these propositions occupies one part of the sphere of possible cognitions about the existence of a world in general, and together they occupy the entire sphere. To remove the cognition from one of these spheres means to place in it one of the others, and to place in it one sphere, on the contrary, means to remove it from the others. In a disjunctive judgment, there is therefore a certain community of cognitions consisting in the fact that they mutually exclude each other, yet thereby determine the true cognition in its entirety, since taken together they constitute the entire content of a particular given cognition. And this is also all that I find it necessary to remark upon for the sake of what follows.
So this is not the logical or that you have been taught in logic.
No, this is the exclusion.
Right. This is the intuitive one.
Yes. The ones that people the ones that people usually come up with mistakes to in internal logic class. So basically, this means this or that in the excluded sense, which means there is one or the other. There is not both. Whereas in traditional logic classes,
I wouldn't say traditional, but actually modern logic.
Okay, it's not traditional in a historical sense, but in a contemporary traditional
contemporary traditional logic, contemporary general logic.
Yes, that you can have an or that can include one or the other or both and have the value still be true. Whereas this, to be true, you need to have, or the only one or the other is true. That is the excluded or. That's what he's talking about here. And then he goes on to say that when you have something like this, you're attempting to encapsulate all the possibilities, right? Through this kind of judgment. So he gives an example: the world either exists through blind chance, or through necessity, or through external cause. So this is right. It has to be one, or the second, or the third. But these three together are all of the possibilities, and you merely just have to investigate it further to determine which one is actually true. But he's not really concerned about that right now. He's just trying to get across the idea, right? He says that earlier. He says the actual truth is not, it remains unsettled here. We're not dealing with that. Really what we're dealing with is just the notion of an exclusive or, so to speak, is how I'll refer to it as.
For once, he gives useful examples of what he's talking
Yes,
about.
exactly, yeah.
If there's perfect justice, then obstinate evil is punished, right? That's the
hypothetical
proposition.
Yes.
Example of a hypothetical. Perfect disjunctive here. The world either exists through blind chance, or through inner necessity, or through an external cause. I certainly cannot imagine an alternative to those.
Yes. Yes. So. Yeah, and also the law of excluded mental is like that, right? It is either this or not that. It's one or the other.
Right. That'd be a good example.
Yes,
of another
you can,
statement.
and it also combines all the possibilities, right? There's not some weird third thing, even though there is, again, the infinite judgment.
There is this weird thing.
Yes, but logically speaking,
logic,
non-general logic. Exactly. So in terms of general logic, you cover all the possibilities with, assuming you're doing it correctly. You cover it with a disjunctive judgment. Okay, cool. And then that's it, right? He doesn't go over any other ones in that.
Yep.
Cool, perfect. Moving on then, number 4.
The modality of judgments is quite a special function of them, which is distinctive in that it contributes nothing to the content of the judgment. Yeah, buddy, that's probably why we don't need it. Sorry, that's my own bias showing. I'm really highly skeptical of modalities actually existing as a Spinozist. Anyway, for besides quantity, quality, and relation, there is nothing more that constitutes the concept of a judgment. It rather concerns only the value of the copula in relation to thinking in general. Problematic judgments are those in which regards the assertion or denial as merely possible. Arbitrary. Possible is the one we'll use. Assertoric judgments are those in which it is considered actual or true. Apodictic judgments are those in which it is seen as necessary. And I'll read the footnote here because it's small. It is just as if in the first case we thought of the function of the understanding, in the second the power of judgment, and the third of reason. This is a remark the elucidation of which can be expected only in the sequel. I mean, I think it's actually fairly clear right now to me, right? The understanding tells us there's possible judgment, true or false, and reason concerns that which is pure a priori and therefore yes. Okay. Anyway, let's continue. Thus the two judgments whose relations constitute the hypothetical judgment, antecedents and consequens, as well as those in reciprocal relation of the disjunctive judgment, are all merely problematic. In the above example, the proposition there is perfect judgment is not said assertorically, but is thought of as an arbitrary judgment that it is possible that someone might assume, and the implication and only the implication is assertoric. So that sounds super complicated, but I'm going to pause here because I do get it. It's relatively simple. He's saying it's only possible that there's perfect judgment. But if there is perfect judgment, then we have to assert.
You mean justice?
Yes, justice. Then we have to assert the consequent, which would be obstinate equal is punished.
Yes. So it's like it's taking one with the other.
I'm not sure whether that relation, that hypothetical judgment, is meant to assert actuality or necessity. I would have thought of it as apodictic rather than assertoric.
I guess that's not what he's saying, though, right?
But I guess maybe he says there's no such thing as a hypothetical apodictic.
That seems to be the implication, I guess. Yeah,
but there should be, because we're talking about analysis, right?
Mm.
All bachelors are male seems to be apodictic.
Mm. So if we wanted to put that in hypothetical, if there is a bachelor, then he is male.
Right, exactly. Which would be a hypothetical translation, which is the same. If there's a bachelor, he is male, right?
So is that what we're talking about?
Is the consequent not apodictic there?
It is. I would.
So then why is he saying it's assertoric? Because he says the consequent is assertoric.
In the above example.
Yeah, well, there is perfect judgment, there is perfect justice, then obstinate evil is punished. Is that not an analytic statement, which is therefore apodictic in the same way
Is he not viewing justice as that definition that we are going on? We'd have to look into that, I think, and that just...
maybe.
That's cloudy, but hopefully by understanding the problem, we've alerted you of the weird thing we find here.
That's weird.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to focus in too heavily on that, but for now, let's just suffice it to say that hypotheticals and disjunctions merely have possible antecedents, and only the consequents are assertoric, but I would think they're also apodictic. Anyway, thus such judgments can be obviously false, and yet, if taken problematically, conditions of the cognition of truth. Thus the judgment, the world exists through blind chance, is of only problematic significance in the disjunctive judgments. That is, someone might momentarily assume this proposition, and yet it serves, like the designation of the false path among the number of all those one can take, to find a true one.
Oh, wait. Okay, I think I might understand what he means by assertoric. For some reason, I think that opened up. I think he's saying that maybe... So I guess to have knowledge of it, anything beyond assertoric, you would have to go beyond the hypothetical.
Well, that's what I was questioning, but that doesn't seem to be the case with all bachelors are male. Is that not apodictic?
Well, because you have to go beyond the hypothetical. You have to understand all
bachelors. There are bachelors?
You have to understand that bachelors are unmarried, which is not a hypothetical. I get it now. Yes, I'm almost positive that's what he's saying. You can't get...
But it's not apodictic either. Like, that there are bachelors in actual fact is assertoric.
It's not about the actual fact. It's about...
Assertoric statements are.
Yes, but that's all you... Okay, but I think... So what I'm trying to highlight is that the apodicticity or whatever, the apodictic quality of all bachelors are unmarried doesn't come in the hypothetical form.
It comes from what?
It comes from...
Analysis of the concept of bachelor.
Yes.
Right?
Which isn't...
But the concept of bachelor exists itself only hypothetically.
Oh. Well, okay. All right. I see the problem, I think, then. But I think to understand it, but I don't know if that's what he's saying. What I am... Maybe this isn't what he's saying, but at least an interpretation I'm getting is you need to go beyond the hypothetical and look at, analyze the content before assuming assuming anything about the hypothetical. You can't just look at the hypothetical and then take that as a whole thing and be like,
Maybe
it's
I'm
anything beyond
overthinking this.
esoteric.
Maybe it's simply that if there is perfect judgment, obstinate evil is punished. Maybe his statement there is not apodictic simply because he doesn't think that the statement itself is an apodictic necessary one.
Well, that's what I was saying. I was like, how is he defining justice?
Like maybe he's just saying, yeah, exactly. Maybe he's just saying justice here does not include the definition.
Yeah, that was my first response.
Okay, that might actually be a reasonable statement.
But then my second thing was thinking what I'm saying now, where it's like, okay, maybe.
Well, that was my first thing.
Okay, so we just swapped.
Yeah, we swapped.
Okay.
So it's not clear which it is, I guess.
Two possibilities for you. Think on it, and maybe we'll contact Dr. Lee or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on then. We're crunching the time here.
Yeah, well, we're basically here.
Yeah.
Okay. The problematic proposition is therefore that which only expresses logical possibility, which is not objective, based, i.e., a free choice to allow such a proposition to count as valid, a merely arbitrary assumption of it in the understanding. A free choice to allow. Okay, yes. The assertoric proposition speaks of logical actuality or truth. As, say, in a hypothetical syllogism, the antecedent in the major premise is problematic, but that in the minor premise, assertoric, and indicates that the proposition is already bound in the understanding according to its laws. The apodictic proposition thinks of the assertoric one as determined through the laws of the understanding itself. Yeah, clear enough. And thus asserting a priori, and in this way expresses logical necessity. Yeah, so apodictic takes assertoric and says this is inbuilt to the laws of the understanding. Now, since everything here is gradually incorporated into the understanding, so that one first judges something problematically, then assumes it assertorically as true, and finally asserts it to be inseparably connected with the understanding, i.e., asserts its necessity and apodictic, asserts it as necessary and apodictic. These three functions of modality can also be called so many moments of thinking in general. Ooh, that's very Hegelian. It's the development of consciousness.
I was not. I had to pull this page up while you were reading it. Yeah.
Right. So he says this is very Hegelian here.
Okay.
Yes. Now, since everything here, I'm going to repeat. Now, since everything here is gradually incorporated into the understanding, so that one first judges something problematically, then assumes it is true, and finally asserts it to be inseparably connected with the understanding, i.e., asserts it as necessary and apodictic. These three functions of modality can also be called so many moments of thinking in general.
That is almost exactly
that is
like verbatim how Hegel uses the term moments. That's basically what he means.
Okay, well now I fucking understand
the Kant study is working? What?
Yeah, Kant study works?
Crazy?
Learning?
Learning? What do you mean this is not just a review from undergrad?
Yeah, well, I mean, okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, that seems like a great note to end on.
Yeah,
POG. Cool. Well,
I don't think we explained what was POG to anybody who was listening, though.
You want to explain that?
Yeah, briefly, right? Hegel's all about the development of cognition or Geist, right?
Yes.
Where we come to understand the world in its necessary order, and therefore
not just us, but the world as well.
Moments of consciousness, right?
Yes. So
for Kant, there is the moment of 2 + 2 is possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then 2 + 2 is actually true. Then understanding that 2 + 2 is necessarily true. These are actual moments of cognition you can observe in a child, of course, right? 2 + 2 is 4, maybe, right? Even if you do a complicated math problem, the answer is first problematic, and then assertoric, and then you understand it discursively to be apodictic.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And so this is the same way that Hegel uses moments of the understanding, and that actually makes it much clearer what he's talking about when he says moment of understanding.
Great. Okay. We thought this was going to be.
Kant is saying is moment of understanding.
Yeah. So base Kant, good job, good insight.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing that insight. Yeah, honestly, it seems like a great Hegelian note to end on. So yeah, I don't think we get many of those, so definitely want to revel in this. And we will see you next time for on the clue to the discovery of the concepts, which I think is going to go into the next table. Yeah, definitely will on those positive. So we'll see you for the next table of the pure concepts and how they're related to the logical functions of judgment. And yeah, we'll get more just the analytic in general. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for that. Bye bye.